All right, we're getting really close to the start of the 2024 college football season. Earlier today, I put out my final preseason top 25. Make sure you click back and check that out if you haven't already. It's a long video. I think it's about 45 minutes long, but that's because I go into detail on every single team in my top 25, why I have them ranked there as opposed to somewhere else or whatever the case. So if you're curious about my thoughts on one team or another, that top 25 video is a good one to check out because I do talk about every single team in the top 25. Something new that we started doing last year on Sundays as a part of the Your Season is Over videos. Of course, every Sunday I put during the season. Every Sunday during the season, I put out the Your Season is Over video, which is the only college football recap video that actually matters. Something new we started doing with that last year. We came up with the We're Back top 4 rankings. And what we did is we picked 4 teams. And sort of the qualifications are they have to be bad or have been bad a lot recently. And they can't have really won anything of significance over an extended period of time. That's sort of the first criteria to be in the We're Back rankings. The second criteria to be in the We're Back rankings is they have to have a big online presence whose fans typically are loud every offseason or in some cases even during the season, proclaiming that their team is quote unquote back. So an example that moved off of this list last year, the Texas Longhorns. The Longhorns hadn't won the Big 12 in 12 or 13 years, whatever it was. They had never even made the playoffs, never mind won a playoff game or a national title or anything like that. So we included them in the We're Back rankings. They have a huge online presence, and they even had a player proclaiming they were back in 2018 and then proceeded to continue to go on to do absolutely nothing after that. But last year, winning the Big 12 and making the college football playoffs, we decided to take them off of the We're Back rankings, which means we have to add someone else to it. So what we're going to do today, I am debuting the preseason 2024 We're Back rankings. These are all teams that haven't won anything meaningful in an extended period of time, and they have a huge online presence. Their fans are all over the place, and lots of times you can find these fans talking about their back. So we're going to start at number 1 and work our way down. Now, the way these rankings work, the number 1 ranked team is, in my opinion, the team on the We're Back rankings that is closest to actually being back. If that makes sense. Now, this doesn't mean I'm predicting them to do anything this year. This is just, they're the closest to actually coming off the list, right? Winning something, a conference, a playoff game, a national title, something to get themselves off of this We're Back list. So here we go. Debuting at number 1 for 2024 in the Uncle Lou We're Back rankings, Notre Dame. I mentioned I did my top 25 ranking earlier today, and I've got Notre Dame ranked pretty high. I've got them in my top 10. No other team on the We're Back rankings is anywhere in my top 10. So, in my opinion, Notre Dame right now is closest to getting off of this list of the We're Back rankings, but they come in at number 1. They haven't won anything since 1991. 1991, they won a major bowl game. That was the Sugar Bowl. They haven't won a national title since 1988. And of course, they've never won a conference title, which for some teams would be a way to get off of the We're Back list. You think, you start with it, at least maybe winning your conference, then maybe a major bowl game, then maybe you can get into the playoffs and do something there, would be sort of the steps you would take to get off of the We're Back list. Notre Dame, because they're scared to join a conference, really, the only way they can get off the list is to win a playoff game. Now, Notre Dame has made the playoffs a couple of times during the 4-team playoff era, but because they're ineligible to win a conference title, I did not give them any credit for making the playoffs because they didn't win a conference title game to get there. And in fact, the only year that Notre Dame was actually fully in a conference, 2020, they made a conference title game and lost. They've lost like 14 major postseason games in a row, going all the way back to that 1991 Sugar Bowl that I mentioned. Notre Dame has made several big bowl games, whether you're talking BCS games or now New Year's Six games. They've made several. They've lost them all. They made an ACC title game in 2020. They lost. They made a national title game under the BCS system in 2012. They got blown out. They've made the playoffs twice in the 4-team playoff era. Not only did they lose, they got blown out both times. So Notre Dame hasn't won anything of significance since all the way back in 91, and that's me giving them credit for a Sugar Bowl. They didn't win a national title that year. You got to go all the way back to 1988 for that. But Notre Dame, I've got them in my top 10. I think they have a chance to have a really good year. I think they could make the playoffs. And because they're not in a conference, that means they cannot get a first-round bye. So even if they were to somehow go 12-0, they would be ranked 5th in the playoff poll, which would mean they would host a first-round playoff game. I think Notre Dame's got a chance of getting off the list this year by winning a playoff game if they get one of those 5 through 8 rankings and get a home playoff game, depending, of course, on who they draw on the other side. But I've got Notre Dame at number 1 on the 2024 debut of the We're Back rankings. Coming in at number 2, another team that I think's got a decent shot, maybe about a 50, maybe a little over a 50% shot of getting off of the We're Back rankings this year. Coming in at number 2, I've got the Miami Hurricanes. Now, the Miami Hurricanes are probably the biggest online presence out of all of the teams on the We're Back rankings, which of course goes a long way to them being on the We're Back rankings. There's a lot of bad teams, right? But like Nebraska, but there's not a million Nebraska fans are all over the place claiming that they're back every year, which is why they're not on this list. Miami, of course, has been claiming they were back every year since the internet was invented, and they've yet to actually get there. In fact, they've been in the ACC for over 20 years, never won it. Nobody remembers the last time they won a major postseason game. They've never even made the playoffs, never mind won a playoff game. In fact, Miami has the worst bowl record of any team in the entire country from 2007 to now. So you're talking about a 16, 17-year period going back to 2007. Miami has a grand total of how many bowl wins since 2007? One bowl win. They're 1-11 in bowl games since 2007. That's an 8% winning percentage in bowl games. And I want you to keep in mind that in the majority of these years where Miami made bowl games, they're 6, 7, 8 win team. They're not making Orange Bowls and Fiesta Bowls and playoff bowls. No, we're talking low level to mid to low level bowl games here, and they're 1-11. You remember a few years ago they played Louisiana Tech in a bowl game and got shut out. The only team in the entire country to get shut out that season. During bowl season, Miami. They've just been absolutely abysmal. They haven't won a national title since 2001. So you're talking 23 years ago now. And they've been in the ACC since 2004. They've never won that. In fact, they've only made the ACC title game one time. And of course, they lost. With that being said, I do think Miami is poised to have a good year. Now, we'll see if they dribble down their leg and leave a giant steaming pile on their foot, which they've done multiple times in the past over the last 20 years or so. Now, they have had a lot of bad teams over the last 20 years. That's true. But there's been several years where Miami has been sort of set to take that next step. And for one reason or another, they failed to do it. We'll see if Mario Cristobal can get them over the hump. They got a QB in Cam Ward. They've recruited well while Mario has been there. They've worked the portal well. They've got a manageable schedule. In my opinion, they've got a huge game against Florida State. We'll see how that goes. But Miami, I've got them at number 2 in the debut of the We're Back rankings. Coming in at number 3, one of my favorite punching bags of all time. This team came close to getting off of this list a couple of years ago. The Tennessee Vols come in 3rd on the debut of the 2024 We're Back rankings heading into the start of the season here in a couple of weeks. A couple of seasons ago, they were undefeated and ranked number 1 in the country. When they came into Athens, they got their ass beat by the Dogs, giving them their first loss there in November. They then went on to get blown out later in November by South Carolina, finished at 10-2 before beating Clemson in a New Year's Six game. So they do have that New Year's Six win. However, because they have not won their conference since last century, God, say it out loud. Say it out loud with a straight face. Tennessee has not won the conference since last century. 1998. That was the last time they won the SEC. That was the last time, of course, also that they won a national title. There are a million just hilarious point and laugh stats that you can pull up when it comes to Tennessee. Most of them I've talked about before. Here's a couple. Since 2010, so you're talking 14 years ago, Tennessee's got 3 main rivals that they play. Tennessee's got a couple of, I guess Alabama is a rival. Florida, just, well, you can ask the Tennessee fans whether they consider any of these teams rivals, but the three best teams, let's put it that way. The three best teams that Tennessee plays consistently from year to year are Alabama, Florida, and Georgia. I get that there's years Kentucky ends up in the top 15 or whatever, but generally speaking, those are the three best teams that Tennessee plays on a yearly basis: Alabama, Florida, and Georgia. They play all three of them again this year. Unbelievable here. Since 2010, Tennessee is 5-37 against those three teams. 5-37. So you hear Tennessee fans all the time talk about, well, if we didn't have to play Alabama every year, what? If you didn't have to play Alabama every year, you'd be 4-22 instead of 5-37, whatever it is. I mean, come on, you can't beat Florida and Georgia. The idea that Alabama is what's been holding Tennessee back for the last 30 years or whatever it's been is ridiculous. Can you beat Bama? No, but you also can't beat Florida and Georgia. So pointing at Alabama as the reason that you suck for really most of you's lifetime is idiotic. You're 5-37 since 2010 against those three teams: Georgia, Florida, and Bama. You've got one win over Bama and two each over Florida and Georgia, going all the way back to 2010, 5-37. And how about this? Tennessee plays a lot of top 10 teams, right? Bama. Georgia's in the top 10 a lot of times when that game is played. Florida has been in the top 10 a lot of times when that game has been played. Tennessee has had several non-conference games against top 10 opponents. You got to go all the way back to 2006. 2006 to now, we're talking 18 years, all right? How many wins does Tennessee have against top 10 teams from 2006 to now? An 18-year period. Keeping in mind that they play multiple top 10 teams every single year. And I get it that Tennessee's been down and out and bad. But teams luck up all the time and beat top 10 teams. Surely Tennessee's got a bunch of top 10 wins in the last 18 years. What's their record against the top 10 since 2006? It's about 1-40. They have one top 10 win since 2006, and that was 2 seasons ago at home against Alabama in that unbelievable night game, that shootout where Tennessee kicked a field goal at the end after Bama missed a field goal to beat Nick Saban and the Crimson Tide up there in Knoxville. One win against a top 10 team versus 40 losses against the top 10 since 2006. Just one of the most abysmal programs of the internet age. A carousel of coaches really from about 2010 to 2021 when they finally hired Josh Heupel, which to his credit looks like he's going to work out there, at least to a better degree than any of the other disasters that they called head coach. Derek Dooley, Butch Jones, Jerome Pruitt. They've just been an absolute laughingstock. Tennessee's got the potential to come off of the list this year. While I don't think they can win the SEC, I do think there's an outside shot for, say, a 10-2 Tennessee team to get into the playoffs and potentially win a playoff game. Now, sort of the rules we're going to use for this in an expanded playoff: if you get into the playoffs but you don't win your conference, you got to win a playoff game to get off of this list. So if Tennessee ends up 10-2, doesn't win the SEC, but gets into the playoffs, that in and of itself will not be enough to get Tennessee off of this list. They will have to then win at least their first playoff game. Now, if they happen to win the SEC, that would be enough for me to take them off of this list. But for now, they come in at number 3. Coming in at number 4 on the list, I think I've only ranked this one time before, but I've decided to go ahead and do it again. But Jesus Christ comes in at number 4 on the We're Back rankings. Jesus Christ has been about to come back for over 2,000 years now. He obviously has a ton of internet presence, a ton of fans online that are always willing to tell you that he's coming back soon, very soon, possibly tomorrow. Tomorrow comes and goes, and still no Jesus. I'm not passing any judgment on any religious views or anything like that, but you could make the argument that Jesus is the We're Back champion of all time. But for right now, I've got him 4th on my list because, just to be honest with you, I don't think there's much chance of him coming back. I think Notre Dame, Miami, and Tennessee are much more likely to come back before Jesus Christ actually comes back. Coming in at number 5, with absolutely zero chance of coming back at all, less chance even than Jesus Christ, the Florida Gators. The Florida Gators have not done anything at all since 2008, and they are by far the worst team right now on this list. They are way worse off than Notre Dame, Miami, and Tennessee. Notre Dame, Miami, and Tennessee all have chances to reach the postseason this year. That's not to say that all 3 will or that any of them will, but all 3 of those teams, their fan bases at least, I think, can look at this season optimistically in that we've got a shot to get there. If you're a Florida fan, you've got no chance and no hope at that at all. Zero. It's just going to be another miserable season for them. They can talk all they want about how tough the schedule is. If they were a top 5 team, that schedule wouldn't be nearly as difficult as it is. One of the reasons Florida's schedule is so difficult is because they're so bad. It's like looking at Vanderbilt every year and going, man, Vanderbilt's schedule is hard. Yeah, because everybody they play is better than them. That's the case with Florida as well. They've had 3 straight losing seasons. Billy Napier has never had a winning season. He's been there 2 years. He had a losing season both years. Poised to have his 3rd straight losing season there, which of course will be Florida's 4th straight losing season overall. They haven't won the conference or the national championship since way back in 2008. And since then, it's been a rotating door of coaches, right? You had Urban Meyer there in 2008. I think he left in 2010. Here's your coaches since then. Muschamp, McElwain, Mullen, Napier. It's a who's who of absolute doo-doo is what it is. None of those coaches are any good. Not it being a head coach anyway. I still think Dan Mullen's a pretty good offensive mind. I still think Muschamp's a pretty good defensive mind. They're terrible head coaches, and they proved that in their time at Florida. So 2010 to now, that's 14 years. Florida has had 5 coaches during that period. And that's if you don't include interim coaches. They, of course, had interim coaches. They would fire these coaches during the season, and they would promote somebody who would then coach 1 game, 2 games, 3 games, depending on how many games were left on the schedule. I'm not even including those interim coaches. The coach at Florida in 2010 was Urban Meyer, right? 2010 to now, that's 14 years. Urban Meyer, Muschamp, McElwain, Mullen, and Napier. It's 5 coaches in the last 14 years. They are turning coaches over every 3 years there. They're set to do it again. They're going to fire Napier probably this season. Florida dead last in the We're Back rankings, coming in 5th. They are nowhere close. 0% chance that Florida comes off of this list anytime this season. Florida will be on this list next year. Maybe they move into the Notre Dame, Miami, Tennessee category where we can move them up the list and say potentially next year could be the year that they figure out a way to get off. It's not happening this year. They're an absolute disaster. Florida, dead last on the We're Back rankings. All right, appreciate you watching. Be sure and type down below how triggered you are about religious jokes, and have a good morning.